Good morning, everyone. My name is Henrik Wallgren, and I am the Business Services Manager with the South Australian Wine Industry Association. And I'll shortly will be introducing you to our speaker, Amy Smedley from Studio S2 Architects. I'm just briefly going to introduce and mention who we are. So South Australian Wine Industry Association, many of you would be familiar with who we are. We are clearly the industry employer association for the wine industry here in South Australia. But also recognize that we have some interstate participants who may not be familiar with us. So in short, we provide products and services to the industry, advocacy, representation and advice to help the industry growing and prospering, resolving problems and issues, and with the aim to create, I guess, the tools to drive business profitability. The webinar today is presented by our industry partner, Studio S2 Architects, and we've been working with Studio S2 Architects for the last 12 months. And they are architecture and tourism experts who have a lot of experience working with the wine industry. And the webinar is really about exploring how you can get more out of your land. So we know that great vineyards are a great assets. A lot of people are coming to Studio S2 asking how to further capitalizing on buildings and lands not under vine. So in this webinar, Amy will explore how you can identify opportunities and the potential that could work for you, and looking at how you can better utilize old buildings and turn them into assets, and creating new spaces into vacant places. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Amy to present.
As Henrik said, my name's Amy Smedley. I'm the director at Studio S2 Architects. And thank you for SAWIA for hosting. And thank you guys who are attending live, and also anyone who's watching online later. I know you're going to get a lot of value from today. This morning, we're not talking about wine, actually. It might be a bit unusual for you, but today we're going to talk about other opportunities, things that capitalise on your building and land that's not under vine, and to diversify what you're going to do and what you can do. I don't know about you, but I can't do another pivot. I don't want to be reactive, and I don't want to have to adapt. And as the economy changes and the climate changes, I want to be successfully riding those waves. So for me, this is about building long-term successful business. It's about flourishing. It's about reviewing and evolving. It's upgrading. It's untapping potential to stay ahead and to move forward and create an extra income stream or two. So lots of people do come to us asking, what else can I do? How can I capitalise? And it's not really a linear process to get started. It's kind of more like a cog system that fits together. And when all the parts are coming together, they're moving forward. I find that most people do start from one of three places, though. You're either already have some idea in mind and you're looking to test it, or you're looking at asking the question, what will council actually allow? And the third group have a place that they think has a bit of potential, but aren't really sure how to add value. So if everyone's good with the format, I'm going to take you through understanding the potential of what your place has, coming up with an idea, getting the justification right to take to the board, and then understanding what council's likely to say. So what does have potential? So I'm an architect. We're talking about physical assets today. We're talking about buildings, and we're talking about land that's underutilised. We're talking about things that aren't providing you an income at the moment, or aren't providing you a very good income, and things that have maintenance costs, things that are actually costing you money to maintain. And I see lots of opportunities in heritage buildings and in empty buildings and sites with potential to change that cost to an income stream, and not for these things to just pay for themselves, but actually to give you an asset. There are also places that don't do anything. They're vacant a lot of the year, or they're empty. Wineries have a lot of these sorts of spaces, barrel halls that you're not using every day of the year, or that you can clean out and have quite a bit of empty space. Disused platforms and places where technology's changed and you're not using the equipment anymore, or you've cleared it out and you end up with these empty spaces. We can do things with those spaces to bring diversified income streams. They're spaces that are getting run down, and they're not necessarily your heritage listed buildings. Sometimes they're just places that need attention, but you can't justify the cost of maintaining them. And then there's opportunities where they just feel like something that you can't let go. And this top left-hand corner, I think, or even the two left-hand images there, they just feel like they've got some potential. And people are getting excited about those opportunities. Something really special, something that's got a really good view. Maybe it's just got really good access, or it's actually really well connected. This isn't just about tourism. This is about back of house as well. Maybe you actually need to consolidate back of house. Maybe there's opportunity that you can see there. Places we really like, places that have a lot of potential. So they're places that are potentially already serviced. So you've got power, you've got water, you've got roads or toilets. Maybe there's something there that's reduces your costs. They potentially have got just a perfect location. As I said, they're costing you money where they could be making you money. They've got a good cost to value ratio. So some of these things are going to cost money, but there's also a lot of value that can come out of these things. So the ratio has got to be right. And similarly, it's got to have a good risk profile. And I'm not talking about low risk here. I'm talking about things that are likely to be high value and therefore have a good risk profile. So the other thing I want to encourage you here to think about is that while nothing's impossible, things cost more or less money. So when you're thinking about the potential of some of the places and spaces that you've got on your blocks, think about what is going to cost more or be more difficult to develop. So things that are under high voltage power lines are really not appealing visually, and they're not that nice to work under either. Things that are in high fire danger areas that are difficult to get water and fire trucks to. Sites that are going to be difficult to get deliveries or driveways or parking areas to. Look, very steep sites, very, very difficult access sites. Flood-prone land, it's topical for today. Sites that are close to creeks are hard to build trees next to, so we need to do work to understand what that looks like. And sites that have really large trees or patches of native vegetation, even the stuff that you've planted yourself, after about 5 years gets protected by council. So understanding where those difficult sites are is really going to save you a lot of money or potentially add a lot of value. So the next question is, where do ideas come from? I'm just going to move my little screen. So we see a lot of businesses with long-term aspirations and strategic goals, and they're both personal and business. Sometimes there's legacy projects that you want to get finished in your time in that job. Goals that they're working towards from a strategic point of view. Sometimes it's just dreaming bigger. You can get ideas directly from what council thinks is acceptable. Every land has zones that has acceptable uses on it or predicted uses on it. So there's parameters there that can help you generate some ideas. Regional and tourism demand, you can have a look at statistics from Tourism Australia and understand what tourists are enjoying today. What you have to remember is that if you propose something quite new, that's not going to be on their statistics yet, but it's an interesting avenue for generating some ideas. Business demand, storage, offices, production, delivery, facilities, distribution areas. Maybe you want to be able to sublet some office space or store more stock to sell or increase diversity of production. Sometimes we work with business demand and we find you actually gain areas in other spaces by starting that process from the top down. And looking at improvements, I think we're going to see quite a push in the next 10 years or so towards sustainability. And I know SAWIA's just released their first sustainability awards last week or the week before. Looking at safety, looking at access and growth, maintenance, product diversity, things that need to be improved on your site. And then there's just an appetite for change and growth and diversity. And those sorts of places look outside the square for what they can do to stay ahead of the industry and stay ahead of the market. What you'll find with ideas is that you can pick the bad ones pretty quickly, you can dismiss a lot. But sometimes it's hard to pick out the best ones. So our process encourages you to look specifically at what sort of place and brand you're creating and what sort of things would enhance that. So I believe that strong personality helps people understand what to expect. And that's for your staff and for your customers. And it helps you understand what would meet their expectations, but also what would exceed them. So you can start to meet some of their expectations and start to talk to growing your character by asking questions like, is it a good fit for the brand and place? Is it going to be of long-term value? Is it difficult to copy because it actually tells your story? And is it going to add positively to the character of the place and the brand? And what you find with those sorts of questions is that when you go to the board with answers to those questions, they can see where you're coming from straight away. It gives them that ability to understand what to expect as well. So you're building credibility, and you're building things that don't date because they fit well with what you're doing. So what do you need to do? You need to understand what assets you have to work with and how valuable they could be to you. You need to understand the personality of a brand and what would add depth. And then we need to gather some ideas. So I was going to take you through a case study. This one is in Lindock. It's a project I've been working on for a couple of years. And it's just picturesque. It's got the most incredible setting. It's got amazing vines. There are parts of the site that are unsuitable for vineyard. There are significant trees. There's areas of native vegetation. There's a creek. It does have power and water. It does have an old septic system, and it does have access to a fire main. It has roads internally and just informal roads. And it has a state heritage listed winery and a cottage, but it's in a pretty poor state of repair at this point. So it's got some complexities, but the site also has some amazing potential. So I was going to have a quick look at a couple of those potential areas and explore what happens with those a bit. When I say old buildings, I don't necessarily mean heritage listed. This one happens to be heritage listed, but when it's got a story, regardless of whether it's been recognised by the state or the Commonwealth as being valuable, I think it's important to understand how to keep those stories alive. So this site, it doesn't just have old buildings, it does have heritage listed at a state level. What's important to understand about that is that the listing controls demolition and changes. It doesn't prevent you from using the buildings. In fact, Heritage Branch would much rather you repurpose them and continue to use them because they break down very quickly when people aren't using them. And this site's been pretty much abandoned apart from the vines for like 35 years or something. It's in pretty good state of repair, to be honest, to have been empty for that long. But it is something that State Heritage will actively encourage to people to actually use these spaces before they do start to break down. So Heritage SA works under the Borough Charter. It's their guiding document. It means that they're looking for a couple of key things. First one is their guiding philosophy, which is do as little as possible, but as much as necessary. And what that means is that they want you to keep as much of the existing building fabric as you can, the materials, the way the buildings looks and is shaped, and just do what's necessary to make it usable and functional. So do what you need to do, but don't lose the essence of the place. I think anyone who owns a heritage building understands the essence of the place. And the second thing is they want you to respect the history of the building. They don't want you to remove what tells the story of place and the evidence of people that were there before. It doesn't mean you can't make your own changes. It just means that you need to make changes that are identifiable as your changes. And ideally, they want you to be able to take away your changes and be left with basically what it was like when you arrived. That's a pretty interesting thing to do when the buildings are derelict. But what they want is to hold the story. So I think heritage is scary to a lot of people, but it's actually quite a lot about loving the place, not about restricting you on using it. So they can be really fantastic assets. They can be fantastic storytelling. And they don't have to be that difficult. You've just got to understand where they're coming from. And sometimes because they're existing buildings, you have less of an argument with council about it because they understand that they have already been used on some level. We do have a fact sheet about heritage buildings. You can access that fact sheet and it just goes through what the sorts of things you need to know and where to get more information. So that's on the website. That's at the bottom of the page here, but I'll remind you about that at the end as well. Vacant sites are really interesting. They have complexities of their own. Because they're empty, they're much more open to interpretation from the council planning code. Every place in a council area is zoned under planning law, and sometimes there's quite a few zones over a site. So this is just a snapshot out of the planning code for this site that we're looking at the moment, the case study. And you can see there's like, I don't know, a dozen overlays. It's not just rural, it's character preservation, it's heritage, it's bushfire, it's got native vegetation protective, it's water protection. So all of these bits and pieces come with their restrictions and their compliance requirements. What also council gives you is a list of envisaged developments. So you can have a look when you get into the planning code, what sorts of things they will be prepared to consider and what sorts of things they won't. So in the new planning code in South Australia, most things are acceptable in most zones, but apart from you can't put a sewer plant just anywhere. But it does give you a list of things that are acceptable and things that aren't. So it's an interesting way to find ideas as well. So for this site, we explored what you could do with the heritage buildings. We looked at what we could build new or how we could tie it together, what all that could look like. And it's a process that's intertwined with generating ideas. So we'll have a bit of a look at how that came together. So the ideas for this project came from the need to entertain VIPs on the site. Council zoning allowed for functions for private dining, tasting and small accommodation. And that's what it allowed for. You can apply for more. It's just that those are the things that are envisaged. The market demand for this particular brand and site was for high-end accommodation and money can't buy experiences. The repairs and upgrades were needed to restore the property to a usable environment, but they also wanted to make it safe and accessible. And the client had an appetite for change. They didn't want to see these heritage buildings go to ruin. So they had an appetite to look at what is it that we could do? How do we create these money can't buy, nowhere else in the world experiences? So when I get hold of I've gone one too far. When I get hold of a brand, we talk a lot about what kind of characteristics that brand has. And for this one, we talked about a deep, dramatic, rebellious and exceptional character. So that's that strong personality that I was talking about before. And this brand is quite strong in that. It's tangible right through their whole business. It's deep and dramatic. It goes its own way, and the results are always exceptional. We've overlaid these ideas, come up with experiences for the client and the site that make sense to brand and tick the strategic boxes as well. So I'm going to share with you a tool that we've developed at Studio S2. We've taken 50 types of tourism and mapped them against 12 of the strong personality types. Not all ideas match every brand. You're not going to suggest bungee jumping to a kind of protective or safe personality type. But there's probably, out of 50, we can probably match about 30 to a unique experience. So you start to look at what kinds of things do people do who are like this. And you start to tick those good idea boxes that we talked about earlier. So we call it the signature experience opportunities. And we map it to the assets so we can show you the opportunities and how they can map together and become value-adding. So this is the report. It's just a snapshot out of the report that we did for this brand. So we've looked at the experience goals that they had. We've looked at so this is Torbreck. I did ask Torbreck whether they were happy for me to share this. What makes Torbreck Torbreck? The stories that Torbreck have about themselves and about why they do what they do. We looked at the assets that they have on this site. We looked at what kinds of things encapsulate the idea of an experience at Torbreck, and we're starting to really dig into what are we trying to achieve here at that point. And then we're overlaying all of that and we're translating it into a crafted experience. So 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth column there is starting to dig into what kinds of experiences might we need and what will tell the story of Torbreck, and how do we tie those experiences back into place and into their story, so that we actually build on them, and it becomes something you can't replicate. Like down here, I'm looking at create a jam. The fruits from the site, the way they create the jam is very Torbreck in its process, and it's just not like any other experience that you can get. And then I've taken that and said, okay, well, what do we need? What do we actually need to do on this site to make those things happen? And we've mapped it onto an experience path, so we know where people are going and what they're trying to do with people when they get there. So this even generates things like, where do we need ramps and lifts and stairs and toilets and car parking? So it really drills into, what does this site actually do and what does it need? I've got ahead of myself. I'm just going to flip through a couple of pages. Okay, so this mapping, it's allowing us to get those cogs working together, and it's planning what needs to be done. It's not just physical work to the assets as well. This is getting handed to the marketing team so they can start to craft experiences around how you get there, what kinds of things you do. Is it a 2-day visit? Is it a 5-day visit? Is it a 1-day visit? What are the kinds of processes that you go through? What paths are you going to take? How does that experience look? So it's much bigger than just what renovations need to be done on this site, although it triggers that list as well. So this is kind of our point where we go, this is key document that tells us why we're doing what we're doing, and tells us what we're doing and what that big master plan is, because often you're not going to do it all at once either, that you might pick out some key things that need to be done straight away that are going to be high value. So this is that key document to help us tell that story. So this is where it's at the moment. It's looks scary. It's not actually. It's actually in quite good condition. There's been not a lot of movement. There's not been a lot of termites. The roofs are really in good condition. Somebody at some point's taken some care about the renovations they have done. So it's in a pretty good state. But in 12 months' time or so, we're going to have some absolutely beautiful experiences over there. Going to have some fantastic, quite striking accommodation. You're going to have some beautiful areas on site where you can entertain. You'll have your space to make amazing things with high-tech products like jams, and you'll have some space to entertain your groups of guests as well. So what do you need to do now? You need to take a good look at your assets. I'd suggest you get some advice, and you really get to understand what the potential of those sites are. You understand the personality of your brand and what would add depth, and we very much specialise in helping you do that. So you're most welcome to take our personality quiz as a starting point. It's free, it's no commitment, but it does give you a bit of a taste of what that personality might look like. And you need to gather some ideas to test. So ask us for our advice from our experience matrix, or do your own brainstorming, or talk to other people. It's absolutely up to you. I'm not going to lie, I would love to work with all of you. I love working with tourism, and I love working with wineries, but I get that that's not part of the story for everyone. That's okay. And then map your experiences against your assets and make a plan. Henrik was going to talk about this as well, but we do have a discount for SAWIA members. I have set up a dedicated website just for people who have attended today. So that actually is that link, but that contains all the fact sheets from our website, and it contains the pre-design package, which is the discount voucher, and it's got the links to Tourism Australia and to some of the planning codes across Australia, just the ones that I saw had subscribed today. If your state is not there, please let me know and I'll add that. And then, yes, you can do our quiz. That's on our website. And also we do have some cellar door design guides. We have some food and agri-tourism. We have accommodation, and we have visitor centre design guides that are free to download as well. So very welcome to do that. All no commitment.
I would encourage everyone to have a look at Studio S2's website, because they do have really excellent guides and tools that I think everyone will benefit from. I think it will get you thinking about your own site and what you can do and how you can better utilize the space that you've got. please feel free to get in touch with Amy directly. And as Amy mentioned, there is a special pre-designed package offer for SAWIA members to commence, I guess, discussions and thinking around your space. What tourism experience can you offer which is different from others? What does that mean for buildings and spaces? And how do you make it as efficient as possible? And this is the second webinar we have run. We ran a webinar last year, and I think that was a really practical one too, Amy, in that you've highlighted that it's not necessarily, I mean, I'm sure being an architect, you will love, a big, chunky, meaty project to work on. But I think you really highlighted sometimes it's sort of small things you can do to make the whole site sort of more welcoming and being obvious to visitors where they should go, where is the cellar door and where is the path and so on. I think that was really useful too. And I think this webinar sort of added to that. So with that, if you have any questions, you'd like to discuss anything of this, please get in touch with Amy. And of course, anything which is not architecture and tourism related, please feel free to reach out to us too, SE1 Industry Association.
I think it's probably worth just mentioning we are in the regions pretty regularly. Happy to have coffee.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending and wishing you a good day. And thank you, Amy, for presenting.